Hi friends, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com, and this video is the last video in the series pertaining to the numbers from 0 to 10 that I started about 2 years ago and never finished because of my inability to create technologically savvy videos. And I will undoubtedly finish between the numbers 11 to 21 when I'm able to comfortably come up with a better method for making videos. But I started this project and I wanted to get this information out there because it was important to me to do that. To say I'm technologically disadvantaged is an understatement, but I do know tarot, and I'm hoping that you're receptive to watching this video and also going back to refresh yourself or to watch for the first time like the videos that I created in this series. For the number 0, I included the Fool to 10. But I don't want this video to be about my face, so give me a second to pause. I'm going to put the attention on the cards and I'll be right back. Okay, so what do we know about the number 10? Like the earliest of mankind, we know that we have 10 fingers, a convenient counting device, especially when we're young and we're learning to count. This might be the reason why the number 10 has been accepted to be a cyclic number. We can count on our fingers to 10, and when we surpass 10, we go on to the next round of 10. It's a cycle. Pretty basic, right? I don't think we really need to dig much further than that. The meaning for the number 10 seems almost hardwired in us from the earliest of days. This is the presumed origins of 10 as the base for the decimal system. And the Roman numeral 10, to represent 10, is 2 hands with 5 digits. In Arabic numerals, the number 10 is the first number to require a 0. It's a new round beginning at 1. There are various instances in our culture of 10 signifying the ultimate. We rate things in terms of 1 to 10. There are 10 commandments. The original Roman calendar had 10 months, and some authors believe that as a result, we originally had 10 astrological signs instead of 12. The legacy of 10 in our lives goes on, referenced everywhere. A new decade begins with a new cycle. It makes a lot of sense then that the number 10 has been associated pretty consistently with the Wheel of Fortune in a tarot deck. In the earliest Italian decks, which is where it is believed that the tarot deck in particular was developed, there were regional differences in the numerical assignments of the trump cards, but not with the wheel. The wheel has always been associated with the number 10. I don't know of any historic tarot deck where this is not the case. It's true that some decks didn't include numbers on them to allow for variations in regional play. But even when they did, they always assigned number 10 to the wheel. So why the wheel? Well, a wheel demonstrates the concept of a cycle. Maybe this is why the face of a clock has always had a circular shape for centuries. The face of the clock is like a wheel. So let's take a look at the wheel. Who are the people represented on the wheel? And I'm using the Visconti Madrone Tarot for this example. Let's start with Fortuna. She's in the center. She was a pre-Christian goddess with roots going back to the Greek goddess Tyche. The Roman counterpart to Tyche was named Fortuna. Her father was Jupiter, who was Zeus in Greek mythology, and Zeus, as we know, could be equally generous, spiteful, and indifferent. Here she is in the center. Perhaps for this inherited family trait, Fortuna was the goddess of fortune. She might bring good or bad luck. She is simply indifferent. The word fortune is derived from the word fortuna, which literally means she who revolves the year. Hence, Lady Fortune's association with a wheel. The one and same Lady Luck, who's associated with casino wheels in Monte Carlo as well as in Las Vegas. Early depictions of Fortuna often depicted her with a ship's rudder, a ball or a wheel of fortune. She was sometimes represented as a veiled and blind woman, as she is here. She's blindfolded. Similar to Lady Justice, except that Fortuna does not hold a scale. Fortuna doesn't concern herself with justice. Fortuna, remember, is indifferent. Fortuna represents the fickle nature of life, and to some extent that one reaps what one sows. The earliest reference to the Wheel of Fortune describing the ups and downs of prosperity and disaster is from 55 BC in Seneca's tragedy, Agamemnon, which you can reference if you'd like. The wheel appears in many incarnations, from miniatures and manuscripts to huge stained glass windows in cathedrals. Lady Fortune is usually represented as a larger-than-life in representations, larger than life, to underscore her importance. And the wheel usually depicts 4 stages of life on all the cards. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 figures on this card. Same in this one. This is the Della Rocca. This one has 2. This one is the Vachetta. Here's the Perrin. We're down to 1, just Lady Fortune. There are variations, but she is frequently depicted with 4 figures. The 4 figures represent the 4 concepts. I reign, I currently reign, right? I have reigned. I have no reign. I will reign. Like a few cards in the Tarot Cadre, she represents duality and instability. Whether good or bad, luck never lasts. So putting it all together, what we have represented in the Wheel of Fortune and Tarot deck is the concept of the number 10 being cyclical. When we've reached 10, we've maxed out. The situation has become saturated. We can put a fork in it. There's nowhere to go but down or up, depending on one's position on the wheel. We know that when the Wheel of Fortune pops up in a tarot spread, one's luck is about to change. Now let's look at the remaining 10s in a deck of tarot cards, the pip cards. And before I move on, I'll just show a few of the Wheel of Fortune in history. This is the Della Rocca. This is the Vachetta. The Perrin. There are some variations. The Perrin, notice, has a cornucopia. This is the Sopraffina. You see the rudder. The Venano, which is my personal favorite deck. And the Vanderboer. And for good measure, I'll show you a TDM. Let's see. Here's the Conver. Now notice that the creatures morphed into like monkeys or animals rather than individuals, familiar in the Italian decks. This seems to be pretty consistent. This is a Noblet with the French decks. Here the monkey has a crown. This one's the Rosenwald, which may have been around the same period of time that the Visconti Madrone was created. It was just more for the mass, audience. And here the Budapest shows in Italian, I reign, I will reign, I have no kingdom, and I have reigned. And I'm sorry that this is in reverse because my camera, I'm not technologically savvy. The camera's in reverse, so I'm sorry about the language being in reversed. Anyway. 10 is on 10 is the number 1 on steroids. It's the number of completion. Remember, our job is to interpret the card to answer the question, or the collection of cards, the spread, to answer the question. What we have to do is to decide what the symbol of each suit represents. Now, my understanding of the suit cards might differ from yours, but for the purpose of this video, let's say that swords represent the suit of intellect and quick thinking, communication, strategic actions, conflict or aggression. It might represent authority, as in the military or police, or even legal authority, as in the sword of justice. It can represent cold, sterility, and abrupt tendencies. You interpret the swords as it relates to and answers the question. Here's some other swords. Notice that these swords and the 10 of swords here all are very similar to the scimitar, right? We have 10 scimitars in most of these, with the exception of this one, the Vachetta. I believe the cards that I have represented here all show scimitars, which, just for good measure, probably they all evolved from the representation here. But I digress. So, how do we interpret the number 10 of swords, for example, for a particular client? Well, if the 10 of swords appears for an individual who's in an abusive relationship, the 10 swords might represent that the abuse will escalate. For a warrior or a soldier or a police officer, the conflict, the 10 of swords might indicate that the conflict will also escalate or be a particularly bad evening, For a legal issue, that the case will reach a conclusion soon. For someone longing to hear from a loved one, the 10 swords, depending on the other cards that appear with it, could either suggest that the communication is ended and it's reached its conclusion. But since no card is read in isolation, it's important to keep in mind that the other cards that appear in a spread with it, they'll give us clues. Okay, so now let's look at the 10 of Cups. When we see the 10 of Cups, let's go on the understanding that cups represent social relationships and passions, moods, creative interests, spirituality, and empathy. We now have many ways to integrate the number 10 with the suit of cups. It might represent a relationship that's as wonderful as a relationship can be. But if it's surrounded by swords, it might be shouting that the relationship is overly dramatic or prone to being overly emotional. If Michelangelo had consulted the cards before creating his David or the Pietà to gain insight into their success, the appearance of 10 cups would have assured him that they would be an astounding success, promising to deliver heightened emotional response. The answer or the interpretation of the card, remember, is in relation to the question being asked and also to the cards that surround it. Going on the understanding that batons is the suit of passionate pursuit. Now, not like romantic passion, but passionate pursuit, like like artistry, a hobby, creative endeavor like sports, one's career, a creative enterprise, or creative energy in general. Batons appearing in a spread can signal accomplishment or burden, depending again on the question and the surrounding cards. And finally, the suit of coins. Now, personally, I'd rather have 10 coins than 1 coin, but the coins, being the suit of material realm, represents the pragmatic and practical aspects of life, one's well-being, material wealth, or one's home front. The 10 of coins can be read in much the same way. For example, in a reading about finances, 10 might suggest the promise of achieving one's material goal, especially if other numbers, particularly coins, appear in ascending order. If someone is struggling financially, the 10 coins offers a suggestion that they'll get there. Yay! Likewise, 10 coins might be a cautionary sign signaling greed or excess. An example, a reading for a hoarder might yield a 10 of coins, meaning you got too much stuff. The beautiful cards used in this video are mostly historic Italian decks, which I think display superior artistry. They're my personal prejudice. I love them. How the Italians invented the game in tarot imagery, and anything that came later was either a bastardization, a misinterpretation, or cultural adjustment to suit, pardon the pun, any countries which imported it and, built upon it. So that's my 2 cents. And I appreciate that you hung in there. And peace. Stay safe, friends.